Unspoken Issues.
All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues Podcast. Are the leaves turning a little brown out there? Maybe they're turning yellow. It's fall's here.
Orange.
And with orange is a good color. Red, there you go. You may be seeing these large yellow things on the road. They're called buses. School is back in session, and just in time for school to start, Frank Castle has returned to the Unspoken Issues Podcast. We're going to be talking The Punisher Back to School Special, number 1 from September of 1992. And man, am I excited about this. I got Dean over there. There's Darry down there. Dean, this was your suggestion. You can obviously put 2 and 2 together as to why we'd want to talk Frank Castle when you're on here, and also as to why we'd want to talk going back to school. But I'll let you tell the listeners some other stuff.
Well, it's just funny because at the beginning of the year, I do love the Punisher. Everybody here loves the Punisher as well, Frank Castle. And it's just funny when we talk about the amount of exposure that Punisher got in the late 80s, early 90s. It's always about guest stars. It's always about guest starring spots. But I like to point out, I'm like, they gave him a bunch of shit too. And earlier this year, we did like the summer special. Now it's time to go back to school. Later, it'll be Christmas. They did this for like 3 years. He got these specials, large size, cover price $2.95 at first and $3.95 later. Just big, thick Punisher action that would not be acceptable now. If you would never be like, here's the Punisher Back to School special with this sawed-off double-barrel shotgun on the front. We wouldn't do that now, and that's sad for lots of reasons. The biggest reason is obviously all the people who have lost people and the people who have been lost in school shootings. That's the saddest part about it. Another thing is just you got to be careful with iconography now. You can't, think even like the New Warriors, they blow up a school like in Civil War or something.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, we wouldn't do that even now, and that wasn't even that long ago. So when it comes to iconography and events, things change. And so I don't think we'll see another Punisher Back to School special, at least in my lifetime. Maybe in 200 years, things will be different, and somehow this will be okay again. But at the time, I snatched this off the shelf. I bought this one.
Oh,
I did this one. Well, hey, you see what happens to kids who, it's a good thing I bought it. You can't be a bad kid in the Punisher's world. At the time, I was very happy, really fun. I think that 3 of the stories are still really good, and 1 is just, wow, this is absolutely atrocious. And it was actually terrible at the time, but I wouldn't have picked up on it because I was such a right-wing demagogue myself. And one of these stories is just Chuck Dixon and his inner city fears. Is essentially like why Chuck Dixon never goes to the Bronx, because what he thinks it actually is. That one hasn't aged well for different reasons than just the back to school firearms connection. But, it's fun to revisit. Lots of great art, great cover, and I'm sure we'll get into more of it. I picked it to just keep that theme going. We like to talk about the Punisher, and here's an easy way to do so, theoretically, for the next couple of years.
Right. Darry, look, it's 1992. Would you have been drawn, just looking at the cover, would you have been drawn to maybe, I got to check this thing out if you would have seen this on the shelf?
No, I got to be honest with you.
No, he hates Bill Sienkiewicz.
Oh,
that fucking rules. That's great. And he's like, I got bad taste.
I got bad taste.
I got bad taste. Give me a spider clone. Where's the spider clone? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he's not wrong. I probably saw this and skipped it. Between the weird Sienkiewicz on the marble notebook cover and just the back to school, I would have been like, what is this? This is a gimmick. I think I would have skipped this. But reading it now was wild. I got kids. They started school, and I was reading this thing, and I was like, man, Dean's right. You could not publish this today. This is an artifact from a time long gone. Chuck Dixon's a hoot, man. That guy wrote so many comic books, and he's still alive today. He still works in some adjacent aspect in the industry.
He writes Nazi books now, right?
You said it, not me, but
I don't give a shit.
I haven't read them, but yeah.
Well, yeah, as for this issue, I don't think this is one that I grabbed. And this is not one that I accidentally read and thought I had.
Bill Sienkiewicz too?
I am okay with Bill Sienkiewicz.
I would like. I do not like Bill Sienkiewicz's artwork, but I do not think it is bad. What limited understanding I have of how art works, and I could not draw a stick figure to look convincing. He is a very technically proficient artist. I am not in any way trying to say that he is bad. Just the style he has chosen to work in is not what I'm fond of. And I've never seen a piece of artwork by him, even on books I like Big Numbers, where I've been like, oh, I really like that. It's always a struggle to get through. But I don't think...
Have you seen his Neil Adams clone days?
Yeah, I mean, I know.
I mean, it's great. If you like that look, he was good. He's always good.
Yeah.
Experimental.
I think I'm in the minority because I know plenty of people who are like, no, that's what hooked me. You're in the 80s, you're a teenager, it doesn't look like anything else. It's avant-garde, it's great. It tells a story, and they become lifelong fans. And that's awesome. I just look at this stuff and my eyes glaze over. I'm like, what am I missing? It doesn't connect with me. But I don't think it's bad. And what I know of him is he's incredibly dedicated to his craft.
Nice guy, too.
Yeah. I've never heard anything bad about him. I haven't met him myself. But again, it's one of these things where it's like, no, you're probably an amazing artist who's incredibly capable. I look at the images and my eyes glaze over. I'm like, yeah, I'm not buying that.
I mean, y'all are metal fans, so I think in some ways, like, Bill Sienkiewicz is like what Metallica was in like the 80s, early 90s. Here was a guy who was like mainstream, but doing things that were a little different. If people got into him, that could be a bridge to other indie comics, to more avant-garde stuff. Kind of like Metallica was a bridge for a lot of people to really get into deeper metal at the time.
I like it.
Great comparison. Well, so we are going to talk about this first story titled The Sinner. And this was written by Chuck Dixon on the art, Mark Nelson, Willie Schubert on letters, and then Gregory Wright, friend of the show, on colors.
Great dude.
If I do not bring this up right now, I'm going to forget it. And we'll expand on this when we get to, I think, the next story. But as you get on into the inside cover of this book, there is this looks like what? You called it earlier, it's like a
marble notebook.
There it is. Yeah, marble notebook.
Like those notebooks that people buy when they already had notebooks that look like it.
Right.
Like, we've got like 50 of these fuckers, I swear to God.
So on the inside here, Frank has put his name, and we have the name, address, school, and class. So it's Frank Castle. Address is Your Town, USA. The school, my friends, is Hard Knocks, and the class is Punishment. So yeah, I love that little touch. It's funny. And plus, Darry says that his dad went to the school of Hard Knocks. Okay, wait a second. I got it.
So my original joke was this school there's one scene, it's not in this story, it's the next story, where Punisher talks about his alma mater, and it is an all-boys Catholic school somewhere in either Bronx or Brooklyn. I don't think is real, but it almost certainly is similar or based on the one my father went to. It's very common in this area, but it's all I could think of because they're kind of even the same age at this point. So I was just thinking like, oh, I know that school. I thought it was funny.
That's great. Here we go. Synopsis goes like this. Frank Castle, better known as the Punisher, walks through a dark, stormy night into the cemetery where his family rests. He rarely comes here, not because he doesn't care, but because he knows that if anyone makes the connection, it would put him at risk. He chooses the worst weather, the darkest days to visit, reflecting the storm that constantly rages inside him. The tombstones loom over him as he stares at the graves, trying to block out the rain and cold. The memories of his family flood his mind, not the happy days, not the warm moments, but that one fateful day where everything was ripped from him. He thinks of the park, the sunny sky, as children playing with a kite. The sound of laughter is abruptly drowned out by gunfire. Men with weapons, no mercy, his family's blood staining the grass. That was the day Frank Castle died and the Punisher was born. His world ended and his war began. He leaves flowers at their grave, his face grim and drenched in rain. He hates leaving them there, cold and alone in the ground. He promises them that one day he will join them, but not yet. There are still souls that he has to send to hell before he can rest. Every step he takes away from their resting peace brings him closer to his own end. But with a burning resolve, he knows that his fight is far from over. Until then, Frank Castle walks alone in the dark and the cold, carrying the weight of his past as fuel for his war. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. That right there is The Sinner. It's only a 4-pager. I mean, this thing is a real quick hit. Open this book up with. It's a great way to be like, hey, you ever read The Punisher before?
You want to open on a real positive note, get everybody real jazzed, just really excited. Back to school. Yep.
I mean, it's a great way to introduce somebody who has no idea what this character's about. Okay, who in the world's a Punisher? And, well, here you go. 4 pages. It really, I mean, that's almost what it feels like the whole purpose of that is for. I mean, what do you guys think here? Dean, I'll start with you.
Remember when I said that Chuck Dixon sucked? Well, like I also said, he wrote a lot of great Punisher stories, great Batman stuff. He really got these characters, and obviously right here he gets this one. You're starting this off because the idea is that much like other books we've talked about, the holiday specials we've talked about, this is a big action-packed book that, like, you know, grandma or mom, somebody's buying this as kind of a present, you know? So there's an idea that you might get this, you know, for somebody who doesn't know the Punisher. Or this is a chance for somebody who's like, I guess I'll try them. There's this Sienkiewicz cover. Let me see what this is about. Well, let's show you exactly what it's about off the top. And it's honestly one of my favorite Punisher stories of all time. It's really, really great as far as it captures the human side of Frank Castle and also the dedicated, driven side. It shows you why you have to feel sorry for him and why you have to admire him and why you probably have to fear and respect him.
What are you thinking, Darry?
It's a great introduction and very much a Chuck Dixon comic. But I was reading it and thinking, what do you get out of this? Like, what am I supposed to take away from this? I know Frank misses everyone. I know he's miserable. I know these people are looking at him, but it just felt like an editor was sitting on 60 pages and was like, oh man, I got to get to 64, right? And then they telefaxed to Dixon and was like, do you have 4 more pages in you? So I was confused. I thought it was going to go somewhere. Maybe it was a framing device with the end of the book. But I do like stories of Punisher in the rain because, again, he just feels like a noir character that somehow survived a couple of decades past his sell-by date. The art was good. I don't know if we mentioned who the artist was, but I thought the art was great. I liked the quick shot of all his rogues gallery with that nice Jigsaw in the middle.
A bunch of other dead guys.
Bunch of dead guys.
Dead guys in Jigsaw.
Yeah. Which I have a fan theory. I have never seen this said anywhere, but I think that every time he faces Jigsaw, it is a new person. I think there is just a trail of mafiosos that he has left just alive enough that they can stitch their face back up, claim to be the original Jigsaw, and come at him. So that's my fan theory. I have no proof to support that. I always hate the idea that Frank has this one guy with no superpowers who keeps getting away from him. And the show, they tried to make them best friends, so he hesitates when he has to kill him. But I always thought, no, that's easy enough to fake. You could see a bunch of Goombas showing up and being like, I'm Jigsaw. No, I'm Jigsaw. No, you're 5 feet tall. You're not Jigsaw. Well, whatever. I messed my face up. So
interesting. I do want to say that as far as criticism goes, I would chime in with you here, Darry, and say that this does feel like the back to school special. There's nothing. Did they mention about school in this story? I mean, there's nothing here that makes me go.
No, this is doing your homework.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm ready.
That was about the only thing I could say. I mean, it's still, I feel like it's a nice introduction to just so if you don't know who it is, here it is. But yeah, it really honestly is like, okay, here's the Punisher. He's sad. And this is why he is who he is.
Well, I disagree. I think it's incredible. I really like the last line, especially where it's like, I got lots of people to send first.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, you have to humanize Punisher very carefully, and it's all got to come full circle to where at the end, after you felt sorry for him, you're like, oh, yeah, he's just a killing machine now. And I think it does the job. Maybe it didn't belong here, but I like it. It's one of my favorite Punisher short stories of all time.
I think that's a pick on Dean, but I think a lot of the lines, especially that one, when I read them the first time, I pictured like a meme of a heavy-set white guy in a long black trench coat with a katana being like, I studied the blade. I've got so many people to send to the afterlife before me. I get what Dean's saying, and it humanizes Frank, because you often forget when he's, using a rocket launcher to blow up 100 bad guys. It's like, no, he had a very real loss. He's a very real person under that, and he hurts. But at the same time, some of this, and this is kind of a Dixon trope too, it's like you could take these lines out of context. It's grim, dark, status update type stuff.
You're right. That's why context is king. It's the same as any cool action movie. A lot of that stuff sounds stupid. This summer, I was watching an interview with Sabrina Carpenter, who had that big hit this summer, Espresso. And like one of the lyrics in it is like, it's that me espresso. And like, they're like, what does that even mean? She's like, I don't know. It sounds stupid when you just say it. Like when I'm singing it, there's a vibe. Like it makes sense. She's like, when I just say it's that me espresso, yeah, it sounds dumb. So I think that, everything can fall back through that to an extent.
Man,
but I did not study the I didn't make that.
You did not.
No.
This is 92 as well. You got to think. I mean, when I was reading this in 92, this is cool as shit. All right. Well, let's get into Mott Haven as 10454.
So
written by Chuck Dixon, penciled by Walter McDaniel, inked by Greg Luzniak, lettered by Kenny Lopez, colored by Kevin Tinsley. In this gripping chapter of The Punisher, Frank Castle finds himself deep in the heart of the South Bronx, a neighborhood riddled with violence and despair. The story begins with a harrowing scene at a gas station where a group of young armed thugs corner a defenseless man, demanding money with no intent of mercy. The situation quickly spirals into something far more dangerous as the robbers grow increasingly erratic and bloodthirsty. Hidden in the shadows, the Punisher watches, biding his time until the moment is right to strike. When he does, it's with brutal efficiency, using his shotgun to dispatch the thugs without hesitation. But Frank knows these street-level punks are just a symptom of a larger issue. The streets are awash with cheap, deadly weapons, and it's his mission to stop their flow. As Frank digs deeper into the source of these suicide pistols being sold to teenagers, he infiltrates a troubled school under the guise of a substitute teacher. There he encounters Tino, a rebellious student whose life is already on a dark path. Frank, with his military precision and no-nonsense demeanor, begins to impose his own brand of discipline, attempting to get into the minds of these kids to understand who is supplying the guns. Meanwhile, the story follows two young men, Angelo and Chester, whose lives are about to take a dangerous turn. After an encounter with local thugs, Angelo pulls a gun and shoots one of them, setting off a chain of events that sees their friendship strained under the weight of the violence and fear that comes with carrying a gun. The situation reaches a breaking point in the school cafeteria when Angelo, trying to prove his toughness, sparks a deadly brawl. As bullets fly and Chester is critically injured, Frank's mission becomes even more personal. Pushing through the gang members flooding the school, he uses everything from his combat skills to janitorial equipment to take them down. And in a final intense showdown, Castle confronts one of the key arms dealers behind the gun trade in the school. It's a teacher.
Janitor, isn't it?
Is he a janitor? I thought he was a teacher. I think it was like a phys ed teacher or something. You might be right.
No, it's a janitor because Frank's the phys ed teacher. Like, you see the guy in the crowd a couple times. At one point, he walks in and he's got the thing and he tells Frank to leave. He's like, I'm about to clean up.
So that's where he gets the... I got you.
That was the janitor, unless I missed something. But it's someone who works at the school for sure.
Right. The kids are getting this from at least somebody that's an authority figure there in some capacity. So, okay.
Once again, the state supplies bad people with weaponry so that they can take themselves out and the state profits from it. A state employee engaged in utter malfeasance, causing a population to be decimated. Same story all the time. It's always the fucking same. Even Chuck Dixon gets it.
I was going to say suicide pistols. It's right there in the name.
There you go.
Specials, Saturday night specials, what they used to call them.
In the final intense showdown, Castle confronts one of the key arms dealers behind the gun trade in the school. Teacher or janitor there. The confrontation ends with the teacher.
Could be both. Neither makes a lot of money. Maybe it's like, hey, this little supplemental.
I imagine teachers were probably in pretty scarce supply in that South Bronx community with the way it was going, so it wouldn't surprise.
Yeah, but that's because of the scam that is millage, man. That's because it's in a low tax bracket, so the state and the city doesn't allocate as much money for it, saving that money for rich, primarily white schools, primarily in the suburbs. So then this school doesn't have as much money, so it can't afford to pay better teachers, get better equipment, etc. This is all very, very public knowledge.
The word of the day, ladies and gentlemen, is millage.
Yeah, you vote on it sometimes, right? Like...
Sure.
It's on your property, it's taxed, and then that tax will go to the schools a lot of times to vote for a millage increase. I don't know the exact mathematical or how it works, but that's what they call it. Somehow your property is now worth this. This millage will result in X amount of money for your school district. Like I said, it's all based on taxes. Well, tax brackets are higher in more affluent areas, so then these places get more help, which I'm not saying they don't need equipment, but like it becomes there's an incredible disparity between poorer places and richer places. And you wind up with this South Bronx school, apparently the school from the movie The Substitute.
Exactly what's going through my mind.
Yeah.
Is that movie. This whole time I'm watching this, which, by the way, did we look to see when The Substitute came out? Because
it would have been a little... I watched it on VHS in 1996, I believe. And Mike Barron had already done this story too, the Kingpin Rules storyline in the 20s. Right. This is a very common trope. I think we'll do it again. Punisher's like, well, I'll go pretend to be in a school, and then I'll kill some kids. The bad kids, just the bad kids.
Just the bad ones. Just the bad
and that is a lot of the people wearing primarily white males. This is their weird fantasy. I'll tell you a story. There was this guy at the flea market. I would have been ninth grade, and I used to buy comic books from him. And we would swap comic books. He had a little shop and everything. And I remember one day we were talking about the Punisher, and he was like, he's got the red. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, just send him in there. He goes, just send the National Guard into South Central LA and just kill them all. I was like, kill all who? He's like, you know.
Wow.
And even at this time when I was a conservative, I was like, I don't think that's the answer, buddy. Like, I'm not so sure about all this. Kudos to ninth grade me, probably the shred of morality. But this is their fantasy. Somebody will go clean up this place.
Yeah.
Instead of paying attention to the socioeconomic factors that make this, and also trying to deal with the violence directly, if you don't address that, you're going to perpetuate the symptoms that cause these crises.
All right. The janitor ends up pulling out one of his own weapons and it misfires. Sure enough, the Punisher's able to take advantage of that situation and promptly dismantles the whole gun running thing, at least trying to take a big chunk out of this. I don't know if things are going to stop here. I mean, the Punisher showed up, but once he leaves, I'm curious as to what exactly.
It won't. According to him, his own words, there's 7 guys waiting to step into everybody I killed. There's 7 guys waiting to take their spot. So apparently it won't. Apparently now there's 7 gun dealers in this.
Jeez.
I kind of like that. You know, there's an argument to be made, right? The Punisher traditionally operates out of the 5 boroughs. Like, there's so much money. There's always going to be a black market, right? As good as Frank is. It's almost funny. Every time he clears out the old guard or does damage, new people just fill it in. I love the Punisher. I've always loved the Punisher. I think he's a great character. I think you can tell great stories with him. But there is the argument to be made, Frank, you're not going to stop doing this until you're dead. There's no reason you will stop doing it. You are using a bucket to try to empty the ocean. Because every time you knock out the old guard, someone moves in and you're not getting any younger and someone faster and smarter is going to come in. I love reading these stories, but every once in a while, someone will stop him and he goes, I know, I understand that. That's why I got to keep going. There's a great line in one of the Garth Ennis stories, The Slavers, where Ennis was very passionate about this when he wrote the character. He's like, this guy is not a superhero. This guy is not going to change the world. Captain America can do big stuff. He can change the world. He can move things. That's not Frank's bag. Frank has something very specific, which is if you did something he considers wrong and he can fix it, he's going to fix it and you're going to die. That's how his code has kept him alive this long. Frank goes up against human traffickers and tells one of the supporting characters, I'm not going to end this problem. I'm going to take care of these people because they did something truly horrible that affected me, but this is going to continue. I can't stop this problem for you. You can't think that way. You have to keep doing what you're doing. I like that Frank is only part of a larger system. I think it's being very honest with that archetype. I always appreciate lines like that.
I do too. What I was going to say is at the end of the day, you can't blow up a social relationship. As long as you have a profit motive and an incredible profit motive, and you've created a society of haves and have-nots, the only way to become one of the haves is to get some form of capital. At some point, if you get enough capital, the haves don't really care how you got it. People are always going to exploit other people and their weaknesses to get that capital. Frank can't shoot enough people to solve capitalism. It won't work. But as far as...
Is that how you see this? Is that how you see this problem? Like the guns being sold in the high school, that is a symptom of capitalism? Is that how you see this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. That's interesting.
It all comes back to, like I said, this is a poor high school. It's impoverished. It's in the inner city. White flight took most of the money away during the 70s, early 80s. At this point, we know the situations in a lot of inner city schools were not great. And from what I understand, a lot of things have improved, and there's still a long way to go. But that's what leads to this power vacuum. These kids, their parents don't have money. Youth unemployment is huge. There's not really anything for them to do. This is a way for them to get some kind of capital, whether it's cultural, whether it's peer capital, whether it's literal capital, very, very quickly, and in a way that's flashy and that's always going to appeal to young men. Do I think you can ever completely eradicate violence among people by eradicating capitalism? No, of course not. People are passionate. People do a lot of things in the heat of the moment. Do I think that if this school was better funded, and if this school had more adequate teachers, and if this area had better employment, that there wouldn't be people wanting guns to protect themselves from other predators? Absolutely. And it's not just me, but any economist worth their salt that didn't come out of the Austrian school, the Chicago school, agreed. This isn't complicated stuff. Now, again, there are crimes of passion you will never be able to stop. There are things you can't stop. The way we respond to them with the prison industrial complex is not going to solve the problem either. It's arguably less effective than the Punisher in a lot of ways. I won't go down that rabbit hole. But yes, a big portion of the problem with guns in school relates to capitalism and racism and how they're intertwined with the prison industrial and the police industrial.
I agree with everything you just said, because we are ostensibly on the same side of most of these issues. But while you were doing the history lesson, my brain wandered, and all I could think of is there's definitely an alternate reality where Frank, I don't know, got help, something. A brother showed up. I don't know what exactly it would be. But instead of deciding to become the Punisher, ran for public office. And you
just became a social worker.
Sure, of course. All I'm saying is that a decorated war veteran who can be, when he needs to be, incredibly charismatic, who is from the area, you could see him being mayor of New York in the 80s or whatever, and just being like, nope, this is what we need to do to fix things. This is what we're going to do. I don't care if I have any friends of this. I have no higher aspirations. I'm not going for governor. I'm not going for anything else. I'm fixing the neighborhood I came from and the neighborhoods that are adjacent to it. So I agree with you, but that's just where my mind wandered, where it's like, oh yeah, he probably would have been good at that because he understands, results. He understands what you need to actually fix. He's not worried about people liking him. So I don't know. That's it.
No, I can absolutely see that. And Castle also knows the power of the closed fist and the power of the open hand and how you can help and hurt with each.
So as I'm doing research for this, I'm kind of looking into the history of the South Bronx just because that's where our setting's at. And there's really only one thing I got to ask here. And Dean, I want you to educate us here.
I'm not an expert on everything.
You're an expert on this.
Okay.
As soon as I say this, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. The Bronx is burning.
1977, and Son of Sam, the power goes out, that everything's bad. You got to understand, at this point, New York was basically bankrupt. The federal government was like, we're not going to help you after a lot of malfeasance in the New York government. Things just weren't good for the city in New York. And what's really funny is on top of that, the Yankees were very good. And here come the Kansas City Royals. And they hated the Royals at that time. And the people in Kansas City hated New York. It's wild to think that you can read stuff from the police and they're concerned about this and this. And also the Royals are in town. So people are mad because the Royals are here. George Brett whipped the shit out of the Yankees. The Yankees won the series, but George Brett, man, he killed them. But yeah, it was a rough time for the Bronx. And again, a lot of it has to do with making sure that the entrenched elite always get sustenance and money, and the rest of everybody just doesn't. Hey, Judge Dredd is based on that era of New York City. I don't think and I don't even think that New York, which was dangerous and could be bad, is probably as bad as it seems when we hear about it in culture.
Darry, what'd you think of Mott Haven 10454?
So this is the one that you guys thought was very problematic. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I loved it. I'm sorry. I loved it. There are so many things about this story that I love. I loved him going undercover in this terrible school as the gym teacher. And it's such a Chuck Dixon thing to do, but it's just glossed over. It's like, who are you? I'm Mr. Castle, the gym teacher. Like, he doesn't like, even in the 90s, this guy would have been the most famous face in the world. He's never worn a mask. He's from the area. Like, everyone would have been like, that's the Punisher to a gym class. And he's acting like a drill sergeant, like straight R. Lee Ermey from Full Metal Jacket. And I love it. And then at the end, when you think
you're right. That's fun.
When you think it can't get any more ridiculous, he puts books on himself.
The books on, baby.
As a bulletproof vest. And then he fights with the guy selling the guns. It's beautiful. It's theater. It's so wonky. It's so over the top. It's a perfect story from the time that it came out. If someone told me I'm doing a Punisher summary.
Every black person in this is treated as a racial stereotype.
I am not defending that. I am not saying.
All right. You're right. The other stuff around that is fun, but everybody's like, homie, what you doing? Give me them sandwiches. It's like, what the fuck, Chuck Dixon? You know a black person.
He probably doesn't, but I'm not defending any of that.
Once got scared next to Dennis Cowan in an elevator. That's the closest he's come to having a black friend.
Oh, man. That's actually hilarious. But yeah, no, I'm not. Of course, I'm not defending any of that. The
other shit is fun. You're right. Oh, Tino, I'm not tired yet. The pin up, the push up thing. But like, it's not just those things. Everybody in there, like the gym teacher, the teacher tells me to go to lunch. They're like, these kids are beasts, every one of them. Okay, we know this is Chuck Dixon saying he's dog whistling, except his dog whistle is so loud, like a dog on Jupiter could hear it.
My favorite part of this entire story is about halfway through. There's a panel where Frank is being mean to this kid who's being an absolute dick. The picture is drawn so that the shadow on Frank's T-shirt kind of looks like the Punisher skull.
Yeah. No, that's all cool, fun stuff. This is a story that could have been a lot better. You can tell the same story, and you don't have to have all of the racial stereotypes and fear-mongering. Yeah. But you don't have to have the weird page where Frank talks about gun fucking control out of no reason. But always says guns. Anybody can get them. Can't do nothing about it. I'll always have guns. Thanks, Chuck. Chuck. We need the NRA didn't get enough press. So glad you put this here. And again, I have complicated feelings on gun control or whatever, but like, it's just weird that this all of a sudden is here. It just felt like Chuck Dixon had to tell you what he thought. In a masked way about what he thought about society, and it turns out he thinks very hatefully about it.
Well, one of the kids who attends this school is wearing a Slayer shirt, which I greatly appreciated. I like to think that is the same guy who was with the knife at the metal concert and the Carnage issue. I like to think they are the same person.
With him, not the knife guy.
Yeah.
Okay. They're okay. All right.
He was one of the ones who was like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. He was absolutely at that concert.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. And then the other thing, I like that, again, Dixon understood the assignment, right? Like, this is the only one where he goes back to school, right? He just doesn't like, and the other one, he scares a bunch of kids straight, but it's, someone look Chuck Dixon in the eye and said, we're doing the Punisher back to school special. And instead of saying that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, we can't sell a gun-toting vigilante directly to school-age children. He was like, nah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a story where the Punisher goes to school. And he delivered with all the improprieties, but he did deliver a Punisher comic that takes place in a school where Frank is attending it, or at least working there. So,
other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln?
You're 100% right. I'm just saying, in typical Chuck Dixon fashion, amidst all the nonsense, amidst all his eccentricities, amidst all the politics that he wants to put into every single panel, it's like, this is a Punisher comic.
He knows how to tell a great street level action vigilante comic of the 90s. There's a reason we love Tim Drake's not nearly as good without Chuck Dixon. Does not grow and become the favorite he does. He really has his finger on the pulse of that stuff. And you can read, most of his stuff isn't like this saturated in a political point of view. What's funny is I'm sure Chuck Dixon would tell you, nothing political about it. These guys, every time they think their point of view is not political, anything that disagrees with their point of view is political.
That's political.
I'm sure he would tell you this wasn't political. And he'd be as full of shit as a constipated hippo. But, I'm sure
if Marvel Legends made a figure where he had a book bulletproof vest, I would buy it. I want that for my desk.
On the shelf. Yep.
I feel like there's a metaphor there. I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's important.
They're coming out with a 2-pack. Bushwhacker's going to be in it, so I'm excited for that.
Right?
Bushwhacker. Right. Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, Dean, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. Like Darry said, the trappings, there's a lot of fun things that happen in it, around it, but it's just utterly saturated in Chuck Dixon's socioeconomic right-wing viewpoint. It's hard for me to look at and think about where I was when this came out and who I am now. It's probably more unsettling to me for that reason than might be to somebody else. My journey's come a long way from this.
All right, let's move on then. We'll hit our next story, which is called Child's Play, 10-page story, written by Tom Brevoort.
Punisher versus Chucky.
Get ready. Tom Brevoort writing, penciled by J. Alex Morrissey.
Tom Brevoort.
Inks by Jeff Albrecht, lettered by Richard Starkings, colored by Kevin Tinsley. The story begins with a young boy named Alfred, obsessed with the Punisher. As news broadcasts recount the latest gang violence quashed by the vigilante, Alfred daydreams about what it would be like to be the Punisher himself. He imitates the Punisher, complete with a skull t-shirt, while playing with his friends Barney and Yaz in mock gunfights. Their playtime escalates.
Yaz is a hoot, man. I love that dude.
Their playtime escalates with them pretending to be vigilantes, taking down bad guys, and even mocking the idea of bulletproof vests and dramatic deaths. Meanwhile, Alfred's mother warns him to be careful and not to open the door for strangers while she's out running errands. Left to his own devices, Alfred can't resist the doorbell when his friends arrive to continue to pretend they're war games. Together, they play out dramatic showdowns complete with toy guns and staged ambushes in the yard, pretending to be embroiled in a gang war, just like the Punisher would be. Alfred fully embraces his role as the Punisher, relishing the imaginary action and victory. However, as the boys play, they get scolded by a police officer for their antics, though the reprimand doesn't deter them for long. As they walk off planning their next mission, Alfred's mind begins to blur the line between play and reality. Alone in the alley, Alfred fantasizes about the freedom of being the Punisher. No chores, no school, just endless action and vigilante justice. But suddenly, Alfred hears...
The things you're focused on when you're a kid, man. You're like, oh, man.
I know, dude.
I wouldn't have to do any chores if I was the Punisher. I guess that's one way to look at it.
Right. But suddenly,
Alfred... Flash, he still does chores. Like, you read the Punisher Armory, all he does in his downtime is clean guns.
Got a lot of them to clean.
I'm just saying he still has chores this kid didn't know. And a dirty gun will kill you, man. You got to keep your shit good.
There you go.
That's right. But suddenly, Alfred hears real gunfire and sees the real Punisher in action, taking down criminals with ruthless precision. The awe in Alfred's eyes as he watches his hero in action reflects his idolization. The Punisher, calculating and cold, takes on a group of criminals trading bullets in an intense firefight. Despite the gunfire, the Punisher remains calm and strategic, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. Alfred continues to watch, mesmerized as the Punisher eliminates his enemies with ease, embodying the very persona Alfred has idolized in his games. The reality, however, is far more brutal than Alfred's imagined version. A grenade is thrown, and in a split second, the Punisher yells for Alfred to get down before it detonates. The blast knocks the boy off his feet. The Punisher ensures he's all right before vanishing into the shadows. Left behind, Alfred realizes that being the Punisher in reality is not the same as his playful fantasies. As the boy sits in the alley reflecting on what he's seen, the sirens wail and the police take over the scene. In the aftermath, Alfred returns home, shaken but trying to process the events. As his mother checks on him, bringing him a newspaper, Alfred stares at his wall covered in clippings and images of the Punisher's exploits. After witnessing the real-life brutality of the vigilante, Darry has begun to think twice and dreams of being Spider-Man. This story's been Darry all along.
You're not wrong.
Let me just say, he's like, man, I can't want to be the Punisher anymore. It's too hard, too much trouble. I'll try and be Spider-Man. Kid, you don't even fucking know.
Right, dude. Right.
Not that it's any picnic to be the Punisher, but like, I don't know. There ain't a bunch of Punisher clones running around.
Yeah, so not yet, no. This is a nice little story to encapsulate what Dean was saying earlier about, to be a kid. And you have all these grand, just thoughts of what it would be to do, just be a grown up first off, but also to be a hero. And granted, I'm sure the adult public in this universe looks at the Punisher much differently. That makes sense because as a kid myself, reading the Punisher, Dean and I have shared stories about how we brought the Punisher into our real lives in some way. Like, Dean, you talked about going to school. I think at one point you were telling people to call you the Punisher, if I remember correctly. The Punisher Compton or something.
One
Dean,
of
the
my
Punisher
favorite things to talk about because it's not cringe at fucking all. Yeah, when I was in 6th grade, I started signing all of my stuff the Punisher. And it did not make any pretty girl want to hold my hand or give me a smooch. Not one of them. Mm-hmm. I was in a class exploratory, which is like a crafts or whatever class. This one was a video class. And so they put your name outside. You're going to be in this class. And the teacher's like, Punisher Jones. So, yes, and that was really good for me. So, yeah.
Well, I told you I did the same thing. I think for 8th grade, I for a test. They're like, write about a hero. And I wrote about the Punisher. Now that I think about it to this day, I'm like, how the hell did I justify that? Like, how would I tell somebody and try to explain to them how much I idolize the Punisher? And it's when you at a certain point, when, you know, as you get older, you realize there is a moment where it hits you. It certainly wouldn't be great to be this guy.
Right. Well, not only would it not be great to be this guy, but maybe this guy's not so great after all in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. As I've grown up, my love of the Punisher has grown up. When I was a kid, I just thought he solved problems. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, if Spider-Man would just shoot Dr. Octopus in the back of the head, solve the problem.
Final solution right there. Put a bullet right in their head.
As I get older, you start to realize it's not only not in the way, but it's like morally abhorrent for lots of reasons. But I love the Punisher because of like this crazy determination and the tragedy involved and the black and white view on the world that I envy. I mean, it's just envious of the, you know, that like for the Punisher, everything is right, wrong, and punishment. That's it. And like in a world for me that's always very complicated, it's fascinating to see a character that breaks everything down so simply. I also like how he is the dark reflection of all superheroes because they all think they're great people, but none of them are as different from the Punisher as they'd like to think.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in The Dark Knight Returns where Batman's talking at the trial and like, he's like, yeah, we're criminals. We've always been criminals. Spider-Man's a criminal. Like, technically, you're not supposed to do what he does. Captain America, less so because he's got a badge and stuff, but, like, Thor's a criminal. Thor's arguably, like, a weird international war criminal because he is, like, a regent for a foreign land, and he comes here and beats people up. Sometimes he just goes to war on his own. There's not really that. And I think that's fascinating. He is that dark, twisted image, but he's not so dark and twisted that they don't need him sometimes and want to work with him. And it becomes fascinating. I think Ann Nesenti, when I interviewed her once, she was like, he's a great character because he's so two-dimensional, it becomes three-dimensional. That as long as he stays the same, you can have him team with Wolverine or he can team with Archie and it'll just work as long as he's the Punisher.
Yeah.
You can put the Punisher in Red Dawn, you can put the Punisher in Red Dwarf, and it will work as long as he's the Punisher.
I love the idea that Frank Castle hates the idea that anyone would want to emulate him or be like him, because as far as he's concerned, he's living the absolute worst version of his life. And to see a kid who probably reminds me of his own son with the dark hair and everything, being like, I want to be like you. And he's like, no, you don't. I don't want to be like me. This is the only way I can keep from killing myself. You should be someone else. He's like, I'm going to be Spider-Man. It's like, no, that guy's having a worse day of it. But his public persona is of someone who is wisecracking and always saves people because they had to process their trauma in two very different ways. Peter doesn't have Frank's issues. Frank would rather be killed than kill an innocent person, right? And he and Peter have that in common, but they have very different ways of going about it. Like Peter will put himself in front of danger for anyone, but he won't kill, not because that's something that he doesn't want to do, but he genuinely doesn't want to do it. Like, he's like, no, that would be terrible. That would be really awful. Like, it really upsets him when that's the only option. There's a comic that I love called Wolverine versus Spider-Man where I
was about to mention it. I was like, remember when he killed that lady in Spider-Man versus Wolverine?
I'm saying, man, that comic was messed up, and it messed him up. If it hadn't been a random one-shot, it probably would be one of those defining moments of his career. But Frank's not like that. Frank's like, these are the tools of the trade. These are the powers that I have. I'm one of the best marksmen that's ever lived, and I've decided that this is the way I can help people. So it is very interesting because a lot of their overlap is the same, but one is presented as an aspirational figure and one is the Grim Reaper.
Also, going back to what I was saying, when Frank's appalled that anybody else would do this, he's like, you fucking criminal.
Yeah.
If someone shot me because I'm doing what I'm doing, I couldn't complain a lot about it. If they were like, you're a bad guy, I'm going to shoot you. I'm like, that's fair. He's like, nobody should do this. I'm a criminal. If you're coming after me, you're a criminal. You want to be like me, you're a criminal. I'm going to shoot you before you can shoot me. End of story. Unless you're Lynn Michaels or Payback, and then it's okay. Don't worry about it.
Frank's not above having allies, right?
No, everything. That's just a throwaway joke.
No. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because he's one of these characters where he's a loner. No, he's a soldier. If he needs a team or allies, if you show up and you know what you're doing, he'll work with you. It's a question of morality where most people don't have the very strict canonically a devout Catholic, right? That's how he was raised. And he goes to war. He likes it. He finds something that he's interested in. And then he goes through the absolute worst thing a human being can go through. This is how he copes. So it's very interesting to get to that point. But if you show up and you know what you're doing, and you're like, hey, we got to take this person out. And yeah, I'm going to make sure no one else gets hurt. It's good to have friends. The Punisher and his amazing friends. One day.
Well, that was actually explored early in the ongoing. He did try and put some people together, and they all get killed. Part of it is just the morality, that strictability. A lot of people can't do that, but I think even fewer people are as good.
Yep.
And that's the problem. Right. This is a guy who constantly punches outside of his weight class. When it's like 15-1, it's finally almost even odds for them. He's the greatest special forces Marine long-range recon guy in history. He's Snake Eyes level as far as that goes. So who else is as good? He tried to put together a few guys to do it. It didn't work. They got killed. He can't do that too often. He loves to work with other soldiers, but he's never going to try and put together a team again because nobody else can hang. He doesn't want to be responsible for anybody else's deaths.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
I do.
And honestly, if they go on an adventure and like Spider-Man dies, I think Punisher would feel bad, but he'd be like, that guy made choices. I didn't train him. I didn't drill him.
We had a team up. You were great.
We had a team up. You were great. Or when Captain America died on a mission they were on together, he'd be like, that's what happens to a soldier, bud. You know what? He would feel less bad about them than other people he recruited and trained and worked with who then died because it was his mission. He's like, this is my mission.
There's a great line, I think Frank Thierry wrote it, where Punisher encounters a bunch of cops and they've got Punisher logos on their cars. He looks at them calmly, tears the logos off them, he tears them up, and he looks at him and he's like, if you want to be like me, you have betrayed your calling, your position, the oath you've taken. If you want to honor someone who occasionally steps outside the law, there is Captain America.
Happy to have you.
Happy to have you. Like, that's an aspirational figure who sometimes has to do stuff that's not quite according to the law. That's not me. I don't want anyone following in my path. No one should have to. That's not
especially
the point.
Not agents of the state.
Well, that was his point, right? Like, the Punisher famously, he doesn't kill cops. That's his whole. He's gotten in so much trouble over the years because he's like, oh, people who show up who represent authority. Well, that's that. You know, he puts the guns away. He's like, if I can get away, I can. If not, we talked about this on an earlier episode. But like, he's been to jail. He's like, oh, where am I going? Rikers. All right, I got a list. You know, I'm going to pick up where I left off last time.
That's one of the best.
No one stops him, right?
It's like you're going to prison. He's like, well, you know the thing about prison? It's like, what? There are criminals there. Lots of them.
Yeah, it's like not even a big deal anymore. Everyone's like putting him in solitary, and there's always one warden character. It's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave him in general population and see if this solves a couple of my other problems.
Right.
Frank is an interesting person, but it always goes back to his code. Do not emulate me. If you've chosen this honorable profession, then you're not me. We've chosen very different things. Again, he's worn a uniform. There's no one with more respect for someone in uniform than Frank Castle. And it's like, you are wearing a uniform. You have to honor what that stands for. That's not me. I put mine away. I was honorably discharged. I suffered a fate worse than death. And now, it's either this or kill myself. So
really, it's just the latter. It's just the long way to go about doing it.
You talk about it a lot, but when Marvel decided to, I don't know what we're going to call it, retcon, I guess, his entire storyline where, yes, exactly. He becomes leader of the Hand and things are revealed about his deceased wife. The whole time I was reading about the pitch, I was like, just let him die. Just let him go, right? Just let him die, saving a child or something he would feel good about, and then show the life leaving him. He gets buried and that's that. And a couple of years from now, when everything's died down, someone's going to walk through the doors of Marvel and be like, I have the best pitch for the Punisher you have ever heard. Just like when they did Welcome Back, Frank, things will turn again. You can do that. But if you want to get rid of him, just let him die. Just retire him, put him away.
They've done it several times. He's died a few times to reboot him. He died before the Angel Punisher. Yep. He died before Franken Punisher. He died before he became the mob boss. Everybody thought he was dead. They just really want to get rid of Frank Castle as evidence because they brought in that new Punisher as fast as they could. And Matthew Price of Speedy Bullet Comics, who I love, and get, sbcomics.com. There's lots of great stuff for you there. He was like, oh, do you want to get this? And I was like, absolutely not. I'm done. No.
Count me out.
I haven't read it, and I have no intention.
Sold negative copies.
It's funny because it's one of those books where, I know a lot of people who read comics, actual people, I'm not on social media, and none of them liked it. So I always go back to this thing. You're in the business of selling comics. Did you think this was going to be popular? Did you assume a lot of people were going to get mad online and buy it? Maybe it sold well, maybe the art was good. I really don't know. But I always go back to why? Why bother with these things? You know, it's like it's not sensational for a way that's long term. It's sensational for such ridiculous short term gains. I can't imagine it being worth it. I don't know.
Any other things you guys want to say about this issue before we move on to the next one?
Is this kid's mom a mob boss wife? She seems like she's dressed like one, right?
I found it was interesting.
Like, is she a mafia princess? Is there an extra layer of irony here? I don't think she is dressed like the Real Housewife of New Jersey.
I love how this story takes the dialogue from when he's playing as the Punisher and then applies it to the actual battle,
right?
Which is really cool. And it's that point where, you know, the fantasy becomes a reality and the kid's like, oh, I'm fucking out of here, man. I just about died. So good stuff.
I also appreciate the patience. Like, they knock over a dude and like the dude's like, you playing Urban Vigilante again? He's like, yeah, sorry, so-and-so. And he's like, it's okay, it happens. The cop's a jerk. Imagine that, a cop's a jerk. The bad guy's like, it happens. Life in the big city, right? And then it happens to the kid for real, though. He winds up the bystanders. Just a neat take on the Punisher that you're not going to see again. I mean, it's a really good point. It's subtly made, but it's like, hey, maybe this guy ain't the role model. A complete 180 from Chuck Dixon. He's like, the Punisher just solved the Bronx.
Yeah, but a lot of that is, well, he's going to do this anyway, so might as well point him at a problem that I see, right?
That's what you should do. Yeah. If we look at Frank Miller's Daredevil and Anna Cindy's Daredevil, they're different, but they both work for the character because they never use the character in a way that doesn't make sense. Frank Miller's Daredevil is concerned with a singular pickpocket, while Anna Cindy's Daredevil is like, we got to stop war crimes. We got to stop nuclear profiteering, you know? I mean, but they both work. When it comes to these characters that are owned by corporations, that's the best thing you can do. Take your point of view, try and don't make your point of view the character's point of view, but find where your point of view and the character's point of view aligns, and then tell stories that make sense for you and the character. That's why it's always so weird when people are like, this person put too much of themselves into this character. Listen, as long as you're not that guy who made himself Havoc, was that Chuck Austin? He wrote Polaris out and wrote his wife into the book as some nurse.
Wow.
I remember.
That's his wife, Annie?
Yeah, I read this, somewhere that like.
Oh my God! 20 years, I've never known that. That was based on his wife.
So that as long as you don't do that, and just insert yourself into the story, to where you're not like the fucking weirdo ass Marv Wolfman who made himself Wonder Girl's professor so he could phone Wonder Girl. Like, as long as you're doing weird shit like that, your point of view and the characters surely align at some point. If I got to write the Punisher, guess who's killed a lot of KKK guys? Mm-hmm. But why would the Punisher not? I'm not having him do anything he wouldn't do. He's killing terrorists. Oh, sounds good.
That's crazy. I can't get over that. Nurse Annie, one of the most hated X-Men characters of all time. I had no idea she was based on his wife. That's
what I've read. If it's not true,
of course,
But I've read that in a couple blogs around the time it was happening. I don't think about it too often. My little sister is a huge Havoc and Polaris fan, and she told me the same thing. And she was so irate about this because it's terrible. When she told me about it, I'm like, yeah, this sounds like utter character assassination.
You've never read it? You never read that?
No, I'm a busy man. I don't read crap. What did I say about the cow patties earlier? People come and tell me something shitty. I'm like, I got to check that out.
I like that run. I know it's the worst run ever on the X-Men. I know that, but I like it. I liked it at the time. I like looking back on it. But that character was
How can it be the worst if Scott Lobdell didn't write it?
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness.
I'm just kidding. Right. I'm just kidding. I've actually been reading some Generation X. It's pretty good.
No, listen, if you're going to read one thing, I always go for Generation X. I think it's a good book.
That's where I can tell that he got mutants and young people. Maybe because it's a little separated from the rest of the X mess at the time. A lot of the other stuff, he's constantly weaving threads and stuff that everybody's got going on. You don't need me to tell you how convoluted the X books could be circa 1994. I feel like he could get a step away from that with Generation X. Once he was able to do that, he could write a little more. So I'm going to give him credit.
The other thing I like about this story is this kid watches as the Punisher shows up, and at the end he switches to Spider-Man, fine. But if my hero showed up and turned out to be even more badass than I could have possibly imagined and did all this cool stuff and was like, you'll be okay, kid. There's no way I'm going to like him less after he wanders. I might stop talking about it. Like, okay, I get it. Fine. That's going to be a little weird. But it's like, how do you have a moment like this and not think to yourself, I like him even more now than anything else? But I get the kid is supposed to be scared and everything else. Frank doesn't put a gun on him or anything like he does in the next story. Frank is just showing up and being the action figure, the guy, the one you hope he's going to be, the good father, if you will. Good on this kid for still turning that leaf.
I think it's a perception of danger that Spider-Man is somehow less dangerous. Like it's a trauma response. I think he can't see the Punisher that way because of the danger.
Which is wild too, right? Because, I guess it's different because we're the readers, but like Spider-Man gets the crap beaten out all the time. Like he loses far more than he wins. His villains are all hyper powerful. His biggest thing is he avoids the fight when he can, but he gets the crap beaten out of him so often that it's like, you don't want to be him. He saves people. He's funny. He's got a cool costume, but it's like he goes home and he cries himself to sleep every night.
Right. Oh, yeah. If the kid knew, he'd pick somebody else,
Yeah.
He'd be like, I'm Tony Stark. He's rich as hell.
Yeah, exactly. They're all like that, right? They're all like, I want to be a superhero. It's like, well, no, you don't. Every single one's got addictions and problems. Even the God of Thunder is like, you're all going to be dead soon. And then I'm going to go back to Asgard and mourn you before I forget about you. That's what separates the Marvel characters from everyone else.
Pretty dope to be Hercules, though. You run around, you drink, you fuck people. Later on, you lead a chariot through space. It could be worse. Some bad stuff happens, but for the most part, he just seems to have a big old time.
He always seems like he's enjoying himself. Some writers are like, he's an alcoholic, and then other writers are like, no, enough booze does not exist for him to be considered an alcoholic. He's the Lion of Olympus. He drinks a lot. But yeah, I agree with that. I think he kind of shows up and he's like, what are we fighting? The Skrulls? Absolutely, let us do it. And then he gets bored and he like wanders off and dates She-Hulk for a couple of years. Then he wanders back and he's like, yes, I fight along such glorious heroes again.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our final story. This is titled Back to School.
This was
Finish
rough.
things out. Barry Dutter writing, art by John Ridgway, lettered by Philip Hugh Felix, and colored by Ed Lazzolari. In this tense story, Tommy and Bruce, two young boys on the verge of skipping school, find themselves lured into a world of crime. They sneak out of Jackson Middle School and head to meet a man named Mr. Acentra, an established criminal seeking new recruits to distribute drugs in local schools. Tempted by the money and the allure of fast success, the boys quickly get involved. Just as they begin to grasp the weight of their choices, the Punisher intervenes, bursting into the scene with guns blazing. Chaos erupts as the Punisher eliminates Mr. Acentra's henchmen in a flurry of gunfire. Tommy and Bruce tremble in fear, watching the carnage unfold and hoping they don't get caught in the crossfire. The Punisher spots them. The boys plead for their lives, explaining that they were just trying to make some money and weren't really friends with the drug dealers. The Punisher isn't impressed, and after a tense exchange, he warns them to steer clear of crime or face the same fate as the men they had planned to work for. The boys, terrified, promise to return to school and leave the criminal world behind. The Punisher lets them go, but not without a warning. He'll be watching. As the boys dash back to school, shaken by the encounter, they spot the Punisher's van following them, ensuring they don't stray from their path again. The Punisher's stern presence looms over their actions, leaving Tommy and Bruce no choice but to stick to their studies, starting with improving their grades in geometry. All right. Well, okay, so we've reached the end here. This is, I guess we are relying on the Punisher to scare these boys straight.
The gun on a bunch of kids. This is rough. I know he's not going to shoot them. He's just trying to make effect. I get that, but it's like, these are little kids. This is traumatic. I think he could have made the point without this. This seemed a bit much.
Over the top.
Disagree. But
all right.
Only because there had already been a firefight around them. There was already a big traumatic experience. Like, if he just showed up and pulled the gun, we'd be like, yeah, what the fuck? But at this point, you may as well steer into that and be like, don't ever come here. You see how bad this is? You see what just happened? It could happen to you. Now, granted, it's not the best. But I think in this situation, I get it. But yeah, you'd never do this today. He's holding like an HKMP5 on some kids. Tell them that he's like, listen, last kids I caught selling drugs are on milk cartons. Yeah. But I think that was also there because the boss had just told him he'd kill them too. So the Punisher's just like, hey, listen, I'm not the good guy here. You guys get yourself scared straight. But yeah, I think that, honestly, after seeing like people just blown away in a big bomb blowing a wall, hole in the wall for the Punisher to jump through, them having a gun held on them was the least traumatic thing that had happened. I do understand, but that's just it. I just may as well steer into this skid now.
I want to point out Barry Dutter is our writer here.
Great guy, friend of mine, sells comic books online.
Would you like to know what he was doing?
Nightcat?
Oh, I remember Nightcat.
Well, explain to me Nightcat.
That him and Stan Lee did. It was about like a rock star. And it was supposed to be like this synergetic launch. It got over like a fart in an elevator. Everybody hated this shit. What did he do prior to this? Man, he wrote some more off-the-wall stuff. Didn't he create Spider-Ham 2099? He at least co-created Pork Grind.
Okay.
I have a Pork Grind action figure.
Do you seriously?
I mean, if there was a Spider-Man Marvel Legend.
Yeah.
That came and it had a Pork Grind swappable head.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
That Legends too.
That's
it's expensive now too. I've got like 5 or 6 Spider-Ham things. Big fan. And I have Marvel Tales #1. I bought it from Speeding Bullet Comics, SBComics.com. Great deal.
Comics.
Talk to Matthew Price. Talk to Rachel. Talk to Dan. Talk to Hunter. They'll hook you up.
Tell Matthew how much you love Agent Liberty.
Loves Agent Liberty?
The best.
Yeah. He will talk to you about Agent Liberty all day, and they'll get you any issue of Supreme for $1 million. If you want any issue of Supreme.
It's true.
$1 million will get you any issue of
We've
Supreme.
lowered the price, apparently.
Well, how much? Well,
it was a $2 million special, but I think we're cutting sale time.
The sale just started. They got a Kraken sale going on for the next month. There's gonna be deals on back issues. There's gonna be deals on single issues. You really got to check it out, especially for the area. It also means the Supreme deal is less. Now, granted, they can sell you an issue of Supreme for a lot less, but if you offer the $1 million, they will take the $1 million. That's the Kraken sale. It's half off right now, so get in while you can.
So the tone of this story, contrasting to what came before this. So yeah, we talked about Nightcat, and I mean, he's got a story, an Impossible Man that he's writing, Captain Planet and the Planeteers, number 1 through 12. It looks like here. So yeah, very stark contrast to kind of what he's known for. This is the only Punisher story he got to write. I talked to him about it the other day, actually. Oh, really?
Yeah. Comics from him because he's in the Facebook groups. He sells a lot of comics, pretty good deals too. And I bought some. We were chatting. And I was like, "Hey, we're about to do this podcast." He's like, "Yeah, it's the only time they ever let me do the Punisher." And I was like, "Well, that's too bad. You did a good job."
Looks like he has a story written for Clive Barker's Hellraiser Summer Special. So maybe he did get to dabble a little bit in that dark territory. And then
why didn't they give Pinhead a back to school special? You cowards!
All right. This is a very much the Punisher scares these kids into making sure they stay in school. It's back to school with you kids. Get back to school. Get good grades. Go ahead, Dean. I mean,
it's just a fun story. It's like in the movie RoboCop when he's visiting the school. If you have any advice for the youth, it's like, stay out of trouble.
Yeah.
It's just fun. This is just, there is the harrowing aspect of the firearms being pointed at what I believe to be 12-year-olds. But isn't it interesting that you're sitting here and you're like, I can't believe the Punisher pointed these guns at kids. But in the Chuck Dixon story, the Punisher pointed guns at lots of kids from the start to the end. And nobody was like, I can't believe the Punisher's pointing guns at kids. I know some of those kids had guns, but some of them didn't. And I wonder, what's the difference there? Why are you more concerned about these kids than those kids?
I guess I was thinking in this case, it's not that he aims the gun at the kids because they're under the bed. It's that he keeps the gun on them when they are unarmed children who couldn't possibly pose a threat. And it's clear that he's just trying to make sure that this is it. This is the defining moment. Anytime they ever consider from here on in doing anything other than the right thing, they are going to remember this moment. They're just going to not do it. And I mean, I'm not a psychologist or a professional in any way, but that doesn't seem like the best way to go about this. That just seems like
as a rule, no. But at the end of another traumatic situation, it's all wrapped up into one thing. You know what I mean? You're not going to put the gun down and all of a sudden be kind to them. They're not going to buy that. That's not going to work. Could arguably be worse. Just steer into this and get this over with and get the kids back to school. One of them is now a doctor. and one of them is now an IT engineer. They're doing great.
All right, nice.
You know.
And they had this story that they could tell for the rest of their school year.
No, they never told anyone.
They didn't? Oh.
No, because every time they started to, Frank pulled up in the van.
Any other thoughts on this last story before we get on out of here?
No, I like it. I think it's fun. If you're going to have a back-to-school special for the Punisher, I guess this is along the lines of what you're going to do. Punisher with kids and guns. But I liked it. I thought it was a way to capture the humanity of the Punisher. I know it's not great, but he's not lying. He shot other children who have been trying to shoot him. So he's like, you're going to get back to school. You're going to do well. I'm going to make sure of it. So there is a certain level of humanity to it as well.
As a whole.
Granted, there's probably better ways to go about it. But, as a whole, it just reminds you that even if he's not doing it well, the Punisher is a human and was once a father.
What are your thoughts on the book as a whole, Dean? Not
worth the cover price at the time. I remember buying it. The cover's great. Like, they made a shirt of the cover. If they made a poster of the cover, I would get it. It's really, really fantastic. Really cool looking double barrel sawed-off shotgun. Mwah, chef kiss. It's fine. The summer special was a lot more fun. I think the first story is great. It should be put in to lead off like a trade paperback or something. It's a great thing you can plug in anywhere. DC's doing those compact comics now. If they decided to do a Punisher compact, put these four right in the front. This is the ground level. This is where we start from. Let's see where we go. I think the second story is just racist. The other two are fun, but in this day and age, you don't really want to mix school and guns and kids too much. But they were fun and they are interesting, and I feel like showed us that human / father side of the Punisher. I probably wouldn't recommend this to anybody except hardcore Punisher fans. There's not much here for you unless you're just trying to get every Punisher appearance or you're into racist Punisher stories.
An interesting collection if you were just like, all right, I want to only get Punisher stories where he could be considered to be racist. That's it.
We're going to start and end with the time he turned black, right? That's where that conversation starts. Honestly, when you read it, it's terrible, but it could be like 50 times worse. Somehow it's as good as it can be. It's like polished chicken shit. You're not going to decorate a place with it, but I guess that's as good as it's ever going to look.
All right, so we got Dean's thoughts overall on the book. Darry, did you have any other thoughts as far as the book as a whole?
This thing was wild. I loved it because I didn't know it existed, and it delivered. It's the Punisher. Dean said this before, but the key to his success is how consistent he can be regardless of the situation you place him in. He's fought Spider-Man, he's fought the Archies, he's fought Batman, and now he's going back to school, and it just works. If you can make the story match up with what he's going to have to do in it, it can sell you anything. But this is such a wonderful product of its times because there's so many reasons you couldn't do this today. That cover is terrifying. It's one of these things where it's like, oh, God, we ever did this.
They do it 2 more times.
There are 3 issues.
At the time, I don't think anyone was like, oh, are we going to get away with this? No, they were all probably like, well, this is a little silly, but let's see what happens.
Thought anything more than let's make some money off Punisher, and that was it. And, hey, they've done a bunch of back-to-school specials for a bunch of different reasons. Well, Punisher's as good as any.
Yeah.
If you do a Wolverine back-to-school special, is that any better?
Well, Wolverine works out of school, so that would...
I just mean as far as himself, like, he's killed a bunch of people. Is this a guy?
Yeah.
If you do a Deadpool back-to-school special or a Cable back-to-school, I think people would see them differently for whatever reason, but they're probably not significantly different in a lot of ways.
I would say...
Hey, it's like Deathstroke the Terminator back-to-school special.
No, he's not allowed within 50 yards of a school. I have that issue. I don't care how many eyes he's got.
I think Deadpool would probably be like the one that could possibly get away with it. That would probably be like, oh, here we go, tongue in cheek. Whoa, look at us, and they could possibly pull that off. But all right,
I would love to see a Deathstroke back to school special where it's just a variety of different characters saying, no, you can't do that. You're on a list. You cannot come anywhere near this school. And it's just people casually being like, you have to go away or else we're going to call the cops. Yes, I know you can murder all the cops, but that would get you into even worse trouble. And then he's like, I don't understand why. And it's just like pictures of Terra everywhere.
And Agent Liberty's the principal.
That'd be great. That would be a good evolution for that character.
One person who will buy a copy.
There you go. There you go. I hate Deathstroke. I know I'm always talking about stuff that I hate, but that character, oh my God. I mean,
I love Deathstroke, but
the design is beautiful. I mean, George Perez never designed a bad character, but oh my Lord, he's making out with a child. He doesn't even have any superpowers. He's got one fucking eye. Oh,
he has superpowers.
He's like fast, right?
He has a healing factor too.
Oh,
not as good as Wolverine's, but like he's like Captain America, but like heals faster than humans too. So.
Okay.
But I love Deathstroke, and I just kind of headcanon that part of the story out.
Of course. And it wasn't intended.
Marv Wolfman's a creep. It's the same guy who wrote himself into the story as a professor so he could sleep with Wonder Girl.
It is.
Same guy. Same era, same book.
Yeah.
Same guy.
Same guy. Not Guy Smiley, the greatest Sesame Street character. Marv Wolf, goodness. Who was never on Sesame Street as far as I know.
My goodness.
That would be weird. Why are you here? I created Nightwing. Well, no, you didn't. You took two existing concepts and you squished them together. Okay.
Why are you here? Oh, I created Terra. You're not allowed to be here. All of a sudden, here's Agent Liberty showing up. The principal, he's like, you gotta go, Marv. You gotta go.
Oh,
and it turns out Punisher's the substitute teacher. You're in trouble.
Oh, boy. Nice.
Oh, that's perfect. That's beautiful. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right, there it is.
It's all the trauma.
We have reached the end of our discussion on the Punisher Back to School Special #1. And we will be joining Frank Castle once again here come the holidays. There's no Halloween special or anything like that. We're going straight to Christmas pretty soon. So watch for that. That should be happening. But in the
Frank
meantime...
Castle Turkey Day special. Try and get stuff.
In the meantime, these people have got to go to the Unspoken Decade. They've got to go to the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. Why don't you tell them all about it, Dean?
Yeah, the unspokendecade.com is our 10th anniversary. We're having a lot of fun. The page is being updated all the time on Facebook. We're having a good time over there, so check that out. A couple of people have asked if they can post on the page. No, you don't let other people post on the page. You got to be an admin. But if you have some cool ephemera, send it to us. We have access to a lot of comic books. If you have a request, every now and then somebody sends a message, like somebody, I guess 2 months ago, was like, hey, I'd like to see some Ash. We tried to get some Ash in there for him, Quesada Palmiotti, which I've never read, by the way. I've only ever skimmed through. It looks good, but I don't know. I just never read it. But if you have a request, let us know. But if you have something cool, some kind of promotional pamphlet, some kind of rare toy, or Japan only Azrael #3, hey, we'd love to see it. Send it to us on the Facebook page or find us at the unspokendecade.com. 90s all the time, baby.
That's right. That is right.
This is how we do it. The song of the 90s.
We're out of here, ladies and gentlemen. My plugs will be in here at the end. That is Dean Compton. Over there's Darry Waite. I'm Jesse Starcher. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the unspokendecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.